4:30.
Meanwhile, the president's negotiations with Republicans over the Bush tax cuts have many wondering if he has abandoned the far left and is in the process of moving to the center. Joining us to talk about that and a lot more this morning, Senator Evan Bayh, member of the Banking Committee, Senator Gregg, ranking member of Budget and member of the Banking and Appropriation Committees. Senators, good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Thank you for having us on.
Senator Gregg, I guess we'll start with this procedural vote today. Is this a done deal or not?
Well, it's more than a procedural vote today. As a practical matter, if there are 60 votes cast for this, then the tax bill will move out of the Senate and onto the House. And it's hard to know what's going to happen in the House, but it seems to me that the momentum is for passage of this bill overall.
What's your own personal view about it?
Well, I have a little angst about it, to say the least, because there's a fair amount of spending in here, especially the unemployment extension, which is not paid for. We have been paying for the unemployment extensions up until now. This is a $59 billion item. But on balance, clearly raising taxes and having a massive tax increase on January 1st will deaden this economy, which is already not doing that well. And so I think we've got to do it. We've got to extend these tax cuts in order to reach this compromise. And government is about compromising. And if you're going to govern, you're going to have to compromise. Then we're going to have to take this package as it is, because that's what was worked out between the leadership of the Republican Party in the Senate and the House and the President.
Senator Bayh, I guess a few questions. How will you vote? How will it get through the Senate? And how much resistance does it face in the House? How much leverage do they have?
Well, Carl, I intend to support the package. I think Judd Gregg is right. This is not the time to have a tax increase on every American. Ben Bernanke is practically begging us to provide some additional support for the economy. This certainly avoids an additional drag on the economy, and through the payroll tax cuts, which will help every working American, and some of the other steps, will actually provide some additional support for this economy and trying, ensure that this recovery keeps going. I do think that, Judd has angst, I have angst, all of us have some angst about some parts of it, but I do think it will pass the Senate. The House is anyone's guess, but my guess is at the end of the day, they'll end up supporting it as well, because the alternative is to have taxes go up on January 1st, and have the new Congress come back, and then put us right in the same position eventually anyway. So why run the risk with the economy? It just doesn't make any sense.
I'd like to ask
That's a good point.
I'd like to ask each senator if they have concerns that the thing that they wanted most in the bill is not paid for. Senator Bayh, the unemployment benefits are not paid for. Senator Gregg, the tax benefits, tax cuts are not paid for. And whether or not you have concern out there that the way the two parties made a compromise is by increased deficit spending on both sides of the ledger. Senator Bayh?
Well,
I don't think you'll find two senators who care more about the deficit and getting our debts under control than Judd Gregg and myself. Yeah. I've been speaking out about this, and I'm one of the few Democrats who's voted against the budgets in recent years because of my concerns about too much spending. That said, it's a short-term and a long-term phenomena. In the short run, we need to do more to get this economy moving. Because more growth, more jobs, more investment, that's the best thing we can do to get the deficit down in the longer term. Once you reach that breakout point and you have self-sustaining growth, then we need to pivot and focus on getting that deficit down, because in the long run, that could be very damaging. So in the short run, I think more stimulus. In the longer term, and by that I mean another year or two, then absolutely, you got to focus on spending and other cuts and other things to get the deficit under control.
Senator Gregg?
Evan's absolutely right. This is a two-step dance. In the short term, obviously, we've got to do things to keep the economy moving. But the long term is where the real issue is, because that's where the fiscal policy is such a disaster, where we're seeing our debt double in 5 years and triple in 10 years, and we hit a GDP to debt ratio of almost 100%, which is that's just unsustainable, and it leads us to a Greek-type situation. Now, we have actually a template for addressing the long-term issue, which is the Financial Reform Commission's proposal done by Erskine, Bowles, and Simpson, and Alan Simpson, which I had the honor to serve on. That, although it doesn't solve the whole problem, is a major down payment to straighten out our fiscal house over the long run by cutting discretionary spending significantly, addressing tax reform, and doing a number of other things, which are correcting Social Security over the long run. If we could take that package and move it, and all it takes is presidential leadership, in my opinion, to accomplish that, then we could actually do this short-term event by governing, and then do the long-term event by governing. In other words, passing something that would actually work.
I think you're hearing the voice of reason from two senators, Evan Bayh and Judd Gregg, who are doing the right thing by supporting a compromise that was put together by the president and the Republican leadership in the Senate, which should be applauded. And I think they've given exactly the reasons why that growth is a very important thing to focus on short term as we deal with our structural issues. But let me point out, both Evan and Senator Gregg, that you're leaving the Senate. And I think, by the way, our country will be worse off for that. But are you optimistic that we can actually get some of these structural issues dealt with when people like yourselves are taking a step back from the political arena?
Well, Scott,
Yes, I am.
Yeah, go ahead, Judd.
Let me tell you why. And Evan and I obviously work together a lot on issues, but I'm seeing a center coming together in the Senate, and I think Evan's seeing it too, which says it's time to act. It's time to govern. You know, standing in the corners and shouting at each other simply isn't going to work any longer. We know we've got this disaster coming at us, that our dollar, our currency is going to be devalued. Our capacity to fund our debt is going to be very difficult unless we take action. The president knows it. Members of Congress who are responsible on both sides of the aisle know it. I think there's fertile ground now to get some action here and pick some issues and make some progress.
Scott, first of all, it's great seeing you and hearing your voice again. You know, I'm innately an optimist, and I do agree with Judd that I think ultimately we will get this under control. I'm a little concerned about the rise of extremes in both parties that will take an all-or-nothing approach and perhaps make it more difficult. But look at the compromise that was just struck on the tax situation here. That's cause for optimism. Look at the proposal put together by the
Unless
deficit.
you're a House Democrat, right?
Yeah,
unless you're iced out of the process.
Well, Carl, but there was a lot in there for them. I think they're just going through the 5 steps of grieving, and they're not quite at the end yet. But my broader point is, to get to Scott's question, it may take a precipitating event of some kind. Something in the credit markets, something on the dollar to finally focus people's minds. But Judd is absolutely right. People who are patriotic about the future of this country need to focus on this unsustainable debt and deficit
Senator
situation.
Bai, if we watch what you do and not what you say, the last thing you guys just did was come together in a compromise that increases the deficit with nothing offsetting in the outlying years. I understand what you're saying, that maybe there's now grounds for it, but in terms of the actions of the Congress or the next coming actions of the Congress, there doesn't seem to be any particular reason for optimism when it comes to the deficit.
The real question is, as I pointed out, that was a short-term thing to get the economy moving. The alternative was a tax increase on every American.
But why can't you offset that in outlying years as part of the agreement?
Well, ideally you would. Ideally you would combine short-term stimulus with long-term restructuring, entitlement reform, and other things to get the deficit down. That really couldn't be done here in a week or two before the end of the year. But having said that, if you look back at history, when Ronald Reagan was president, the deficit was ballooning in 81, 82. They came together, took steps to get under control. During Bill Clinton's presidency, they took steps to actually put us on a path toward a surplus. It can be done. Yeah. The real question is whether the political process is currently configured with the rise of extremes on both sides makes that more difficult. It probably does, but it does not make it impossible, particularly if there's a precipitating event of some kind.
Senator Gregg?
Steve, let me tell you the event. The event's going to be the debt ceiling. We're going to hit this debt ceiling sometime in April.
Don't you have to take it? No, isn't December 18th the day when you have to take some action?
No.
No? Okay.
Well, no, that's the CR. But the debt ceiling we're going to hit in April. That is not going to be renewed. We're not going to extend and expand the debt ceiling unless there's some significant action taken to reduce the out-year debt. And yes, it would have been good if they put Social Security reform in this package, but considering the time frame that was involved, they weren't going to do it. However, the template, as I said, is out there. It's sitting there for the taking. It's become low-hanging fruit, which is the Erskine-Bowles, Alan Simpson report. And I genuinely believe that there is going to be significant action in discretionary control, in Social Security, in entitlement reform, and in tax reform, which is where we really can make some great progress by radically reducing rates, by eliminating deductions and exemptions. And it's going to all occur, and the forcing mechanism is going to be the debt ceiling.
I agree with Judd 100% on that. Look to March, April. No one's going to want to vote to raise the debt ceiling. There's going to need to be significant reform in order for that to get passed.
What a way to kick off the summer with a debate like that. Senators, appreciate your time. We'll be watching this afternoon.
Thank you, Carl.
Good to talk to both of you, Senators Evan Bai and Judd Gregg. When we come back.